She had 2 kids, less than 10 grand, and no clue what to do next. But she had one thing no one could take away. The courthouse smelled like bleach and old paper, like every failed promise had been scrubbed from its halls but left a stain anyway. Rachel stood by the exit, her fingers tightening around the leather strap of her handbag. It was over. 12 years, 2 kids, and a mortgage split down the middle, though if you asked the judge, the numbers weren't quite as even as the damage. Chris didn't even look back. He never did anymore. Outside, the winter wind slapped her cheeks pink. The parking meter blinked expired. Her minivan was 2 blocks down because she'd been too proud to ask her sister for quarters. Rachel hadn't cried. Not in the courtroom, not in the car, not when the papers were first filed. She wasn't saving her tears, they just never came. Maybe they would later, when the silence of the house started pressing in. Back at home, the kids were with Chris for the weekend. The walls echoed without them. She wandered the kitchen, half hers now, technically, eyeing the cracked tile near the sink, the hand-painted mug with a chipped rim, the sticky note that still read, "Love you." See, in faded Sharpie. She threw it in the trash. Then she poured herself a glass of wine and sat at the dining table with a yellow legal pad. She wrote down a list. What I have. $9,400 from the joint account. Degree in marketing, ancient, maybe still useful. Old contacts from college. A stubborn streak that drove Chris crazy. What I don't have. A job. Child support for another 30 days. A plan. She stared at the last line. A plan. That night, sleep came in short, angry bursts. She woke up at 3:14 a.m. with a clear image in her mind, the corner building on 9th and Willow. It used to be a florist. For months now, its windows had been shuttered, a for-lease sign curling on the inside glass like a dying leaf. She didn't know why she thought of it. Only that she did. By 10 a.m., she was standing in front of it, coffee in one hand, notepad in the other. The space was dusty and stale inside, but sunlight still streamed through the grime. She imagined shelves. She imagined people walking in, warm laughter, music playing low. She called the number on the sign. "I'd like to know how much the lease is," she said, pretending her voice didn't shake. $2,800 a month, the landlord said. "It's been empty a while. Could probably cut you a deal." Rachel smiled, teeth clenched. She couldn't afford it, not by a long shot. "Can I see the inside?" By noon, she was pacing through the space, her boots clacking on tile. It smelled like stale roses and mildew. She didn't care. In her head, it was already her shop. She didn't know what she was going to sell yet. Only that she needed to sell something. Something good. Something hers. She called her sister that night. "You're insane," Heather said. "You've got less than 10 grand to your name and no business plan." "I know. What would you even sell?" Rachel was quiet for a second. "I've been thinking about home goods. Local makers. Curated stuff. Things people buy for comfort, for meaning. You know what I mean." "You mean overpriced candles and pillows?" Heather snorted. "People in this town barely pay for groceries." "They will. If I do it right." Heather sighed. "Ratch. You don't have to prove anything." Rachel didn't say anything. She wasn't trying to prove something. She was trying to survive. 2 days later, she signed the lease. She didn't sleep that night either. The keys felt heavy in her palm. They weren't just keys to a store, they were keys to possibility, to the person she hadn't allowed herself to be in over a decade. Still, as Rachel stood inside the dusty shell of the old florist shop, possibility felt suspiciously like panic. There was no heat. The overhead lights flickered like nervous eyes. She swept for 3 hours straight, her back aching, hair in a makeshift bun, the kind Chris used to call her hustle knot. She smiled thinking of that. Then stopped smiling. By the end of the week, she'd spent $2,000 on insurance, permits, and a contractor who said things like, "This wiring's not up to code," and, "I'll try to keep it under 5 grand. She nodded and wrote the check, stomach twisting like a squeezed rag. She named the shop Nest. Not because it was cute, though it was, she liked the idea of a place where people came to make their own lives warmer. A small, curated home goods store. Candles, pottery, textiles, artisan-made soaps. Things she herself had never let herself buy, but always wanted. The branding came easy. Her marketing instincts, long dormant, flickered back to life. She designed the logo herself at 2 a.m., sweating under a blanket on the couch while YouTube tutorials whispered about font weights and color palettes. She ordered business cards. She posted a coming soon photo to a brand new Instagram page. 3 followers. Then 20. Then 75. The first batch of candles arrived in a busted cardboard box. She cried anyway, holding one close, breathing in bergamot and cedar like it was salvation. Still, by the 3rd week, her bank balance sat at $417.92. She needed inventory. She needed shelves. She needed miracles. Instead, she got a knock at the door. A woman in her 50s stood outside, wearing a wide scarf and sharp eyes. "I saw your post," she said. "Are you taking local vendors?" Rachel blinked. Yes. I mean, I want to. I knit. Throws and such. Good quality. No acrylic crap. I sell on Etsy but shipping's a pain. Mind if I bring a sample?" 2 days later, the woman returned with a bin of thick, stunning hand-knit throws. Earth tones. Minimalist tags. Rachel touched one and almost wept again. Word got around faster than she expected. A ceramicist emailed. Then a soap maker. A young guy who made framed pressed ferns from salvaged wood. By week 5, her tiny store had 8 local artisans and a window display she was proud of. The soft opening was a Thursday evening. It rained. Rachel stood in the center of Nest, dressed in black jeans and her nicest sweater, trying not to fidget with the hem. She'd made little paper bags by hand. She'd burned her fingers gluing price tags. She hadn't told her kids how scared she was. 6 people showed up. 2 were Heather and her husband. But one woman, tall, elegant, stranger, bought a blanket and 3 candles. "Lovely shop," she said, and Rachel clung to the words all night like a raft in choppy water. Friday brought 12 more. Saturday, 25. By Sunday evening, she'd sold $872 worth of inventory. It wasn't a profit. Not even close. But it was something. A heartbeat. And Rachel, who had been half dead inside for a long time, started to feel her own pulse again. The first month was a lesson in contrasts, glowing Instagram comments and brutal spreadsheets, cozy smiles from customers and cold sweats at midnight. Nest was alive, and Rachel was exhausted. But in the middle of the chaos, something began to shift. The kids noticed it first. "Mom, you don't yell as much," Emily said over dinner one night, poking at her mac and cheese. Rachel looked up, startled. "I used to yell." "Yeah," Ben chimed in, like, all the time. She started to defend herself, then stopped. They weren't wrong. The Rachel they knew for years was clenched tight, frustrated, brittle, always on edge. But this version of her, the one who spent her days unpacking boxes of handmade mugs and chatting with soap makers, had softened. Not everything was smooth. There were quiet days in the store where no one came in at all. There was a delay on a shipment of essential oils. One weekend, her POS system crashed and she had to handwrite receipts like it was 1993. But she kept showing up, even when it felt like the world might be laughing behind her back. Then came the profile. A local lifestyle blogger, Lily with the Lens, stopped by one Saturday afternoon. Young, peppy, probably not old enough to rent a car. She took photos of everything, the shelves, the textures, even Rachel's coffee mug. "You're killing it," she told Rachel. "This place feels intentional." Rachel smiled, unsure what that even meant, but grateful. The post went live the following Tuesday. By Wednesday, the store was buzzing. "I saw you on Lily's blog. I didn't know this place was here." Finally, a store that feels like Brooklyn, without the attitude. Rachel stayed open an extra hour that night. Sales tripled. She texted Heather. "Sold $2,300 today." I think I'm going to make it. Heather replied with a thumbs-up emoji. No words. Rachel stared at it, hollow. They hadn't spoken much since the opening. Rachel knew her sister wasn't trying to be cold, she was just busy, practical, not easily impressed. But a part of Rachel, the fragile part, had hoped for more than a thumbs-up. 2 days later, Chris stopped by. She didn't recognize his car at first, newer, sleeker. He parked across the street, walked in like he belonged there. Wow, he said, looking around. You did this? Rachel wiped her hands on her apron. Yes. What are you doing here? He shrugged. Heard about it. Emily mentioned the blog post. Thought I'd stop in. He picked up a small jar of honey and flipped it in his hand like a coin. This stuff's not cheap. It's not supposed to be, she said evenly. He nodded. You always were stubborn. No, she said, stepping forward. I was right. You just didn't believe in me. A pause. Chris didn't argue. Just set the honey down and gave a half smile. Well. Looks like you don't need me to. He left without buying anything. That night, Rachel cried harder than she had in months. Not because she wanted him back. But because it still hurt, that someone who had once promised forever couldn't see her clearly until it was too late. By the end of the 3rd month, Nest was making just enough to break even, which, to Rachel, felt like a small miracle. She learned how to read profit margins, how to track supplier lead times, how to tell a customer gently that no, there were no refunds on candles once they were lit. Her hands, once soft, bore tiny cuts and burns, reminders of late-night inventory counts and glue gun mishaps. But she carried herself differently now, shoulders straighter, eyes clearer. Even her laugh had changed. It came easier, warmer, no longer dipped in apology. And yet, some things still gnawed at her. Heather stopped returning calls. At first, it was just missed texts. Then ignored voicemails. Rachel left a message on a Sunday, "Hey, I'm thinking of hosting a Mother's Day pop-up. Want to grab coffee and brainstorm?" And got nothing back. Not even a "busy this week." One rainy Tuesday, after another unanswered call, Rachel drove to Heather's office. She found her in a small corner room at the back of a dental clinic. Heather looked up, surprised, guarded. "I was in the neighborhood," Rachel said, too casually. Heather sighed. "Rachel, you can't just show up at my job. Then call me back. I'm busy." "You're mad." Silence. Finally, Heather set down her pen. "No, Rach. I'm not mad. I'm tired. Watching you build this store, it's amazing. But also, it's all you talk about. I supported you, I showed up, but lately, it's like there's no room for anything else." Rachel blinked. "I didn't know you felt that way." "I didn't either," Heather said. "Until it started to feel like I didn't matter unless I was clapping for you." The words hit harder than she expected. Rachel left without saying much, just nodding, quietly devastated. That night, she found the old box in the back of her bedroom closet. It was the one she'd shoved there after the divorce, filled with photographs, cards, and little scraps of their shared life. Tucked between a Valentine's Day note from Chris and a finger-painted Mother's Day card was a torn piece of notebook paper. Heather's handwriting. "You'll do great things. Just don't forget who cheered first." Rachel sat on the floor for a long time, holding the note like a piece of glass. She hadn't forgotten Heather, not really, but she'd let the momentum sweep her too far too fast. The next day, she closed the store early. She showed up at Heather's apartment with a bag of Chinese takeout and 2 beers. "I was an ass," she said as soon as the door opened. "You were right. I got caught up in proving I could survive, and I forgot how to be a sister." Heather stood silent for a moment. Then stepped aside and let her in. They ate on the couch, just like old times, in sweats and socks, watching some terrible true crime documentary they both pretended to hate. It wasn't dramatic. There were no big speeches. But something knit back together, soft and silent. Later that week, Heather dropped by Nest. "Smells better than my dentist office," she joked, picking up a sandalwood candle. Rachel smiled. "Thinking of adding some local art?" Want to curate it with me? Heather raised an eyebrow. You sure you can share control? Rachel laughed. No. But I'm willing to try. Outside, spring was finally arriving. Customers lingered longer. Rachel began writing small thank you notes for each sale over $50, just to let people know she saw them. And for the first time in a long while, she wasn't just building a store. She was rebuilding a life. Summer crept in slowly, one sunlit afternoon at a time, and with it came more foot traffic, more attention, and, almost to Rachel's disbelief, real money. Not just enough to cover rent and bills. Actual profit. Nest had become something of a local destination. People tagged it in Instagram stories. Bloggers started calling it the soul of 9th Street. On Saturdays, the sidewalk outside filled with small crowds, coffee in hand, browsing the displays Rachel began putting out front, woven baskets, handmade earrings, hand-lettered signs that read, "Come in. You belong here." The city small business council asked her to speak on a panel. She almost said no. She hated public speaking, the dry mouth, the spotlight. But Heather convinced her. You survived a divorce and built a brand from scratch. What's 5 minutes with a microphone? The panel was in a library auditorium. She wore her best dress and remembered to breathe. She told them about fear, about mistakes, about how some days she still felt like an imposter in her own success. People clapped. Afterwards, a woman approached her with a firm handshake and a clean, expensive blazer. I'm Amanda Clark, she said. I manage retail properties in a new development going up downtown. Ever think about a second location? Rachel blinked. She hadn't. Not seriously. Not yet. Amanda smiled. Your brand has legs. Think about it. That night, Rachel sat on the floor of her living room, surrounded by receipts and samples, Ben and Emily asleep upstairs. A second store. The idea thrilled and terrified her. Growth meant risk. Risk meant more sleepless nights, more stress, more ways to fail. But it also meant freedom. Legacy. A future. Still, something tugged at her. A hesitation. She pulled out her notebook, the same yellow pad she used the night after the divorce, and wrote. What I've gained. Confidence. My kids' respect. Community. What I could lose. Time with Ben and Emily. Control. Myself. The next morning, she called Amanda back. Let's meet for coffee, she said. I'm interested. But I want to grow slow. She paused. And smart. Amanda respected that. They agreed to revisit in the fall. Meanwhile, Rachel poured herself into Nest with a renewed kind of love, not the desperate, white-knuckle drive of survival, but something deeper. Intentional. Stable. One Friday afternoon, a woman in her late 60s came in, silver hair, leather bag, soft voice. She wandered slowly, like she was walking through a memory. At the checkout, she looked Rachel in the eye. I used to own a shop just like this, she said. Back in the 80s. Before Amazon killed everything. Rachel smiled gently. That must have been incredible. The woman nodded. It was. But I didn't adapt. You're doing it right. Don't lose the heart of it. Rachel stood frozen for a second, then reached into the drawer and pulled out a card. Come back anytime, she said. You've got a permanent VIP seat here. The woman left with a small wrapped package and a look Rachel couldn't quite read, something between nostalgia and relief. Later that night, as Rachel locked up, she saw her reflection in the glass door. She looked like herself. For the first time in her adult life. And that, more than the money or the praise or even the possibility of expansion, felt like the real win. The storm rolled in fast, not from the sky, but from the mailbox. It started with a thick envelope from the IRS. Then a second from her business bank. A discrepancy. A review. Something about vendor classification errors. She'd filed everything herself, trusting online templates and free webinars. Now it seemed she'd made a mistake. Maybe several. Rachel sat at her dining table surrounded by forms, old receipts, and that horrible prickling heat behind her eyes that always preceded a panic attack. The kids were at Chris's for the weekend. She'd wanted to use the time to plan summer inventory. Instead, she called Heather. "I messed up," she whispered. Heather came over in 20 minutes, laptop in hand. They sat side by side on the floor, shoes off, surrounded by paper. After an hour, Heather looked up. "Okay. It's bad. But not disaster bad." Rachel laughed, humorless. "Is that a real financial term?" Heather grinned. "It is now. The tax error could be fixed with a payment plan and amended documents. The bank issue was more of a misfiling than anything fraudulent, thank God. Still, the costs added up. Over $6,000 in fines and fees. Money Rachel didn't have on hand. She considered taking a personal loan. But the idea of more debt, more weight, made her stomach churn. Instead, she did something harder. She asked for help. She wrote an email to her community. Honest, direct, without pity. She explained what had happened. What she'd learned. And what she needed. "I've made mistakes, but I'm learning fast," she wrote. "And I'm not giving up on Nest, because it's not just my dream anymore. It's ours." Then she created a pre-order campaign. Limited edition bundles. Gift boxes. Private shopping experiences. She even offered personalized home styling consults. She hit send. And waited. By morning, the first 10 orders had come in. By the end of the week, there were over 100. Heather nearly cried. Rachel actually did. People sent notes with their orders. "You saved me during a hard time. Happy to return the favor. I come to your store just to breathe. You've built something rare. Your shop reminds me of the one my mom used to take me to as a kid." The total cleared her debt. With a little to spare. But the most valuable thing wasn't the money. It was the validation. That she wasn't just selling candles and pillows, she was selling a feeling, a memory, a piece of hope. Still, the storm had shaken something loose inside her. That night, as she lit a test candle from a new vendor, she sat by the window and thought about legacy. About how easily it all could have crumbled. She wasn't invincible. No one was. But maybe that was the point, building anyway, knowing everything could fall apart. Risking love, risking failure, risking belief. That weekend, she took the kids to the beach. They stayed until sunset, salty and sunburned, eating sandwiches from a cooler and laughing over nothing. As the sky turned gold, Ben asked, "Is Nest gonna be around forever?" Rachel looked out at the water. "No," she said softly. "Nothing is." Then she smiled at him. "But I'm going to fight to keep it here as long as I can." Fall came early that year, crisp and golden, and with it came an invitation, the city's annual Entrepreneur Gala. Black tie. Industry press. Awards. Rachel found the envelope wedged between a vendor invoice and a wholesale candle catalog. She almost didn't go. But Emily insisted. "You never dress up. It's weird seeing you wear anything besides jeans and cardigans." Heather offered to help her pick something. "Think polished," she said. "But still you." Rachel laughed. So, comfortable but haunted. In the end, she wore a navy dress with sleeves that fluttered at the wrists. It wasn't expensive, but it fit right, like it belonged to the woman she had become, not the one still buried in court documents and old marriage photos. At the gala, the lights sparkled. The wine flowed. When her name was called for, Emerging Business of the Year, she nearly dropped her glass. She walked up slowly, heart pounding in her chest like it wanted out. The applause was real. The smiles, genuine. She stood at the podium, blinking against the lights, gripping her notes. "I'm not your typical entrepreneur," she began. "I didn't start with a plan. I started with a failure. A pause. A marriage that ended. A bank account that barely breathed. Kids I was terrified of disappointing." She looked out at the crowd. "But what I had, what I rediscovered, was grit. And people who believed in me. Who showed up. Who gave this tiny store a chance." She didn't talk long. Just enough to say thank you. Just enough to leave a crack for truth to shine through. Afterwards, Amanda Clark found her by the bar. The downtown location still on the table, she said. Ready to talk next steps? Rachel nodded. Soon. But not yet. I want Nest to stay what it is a little longer. Amanda smiled. You're rare. Most people rush the moment they smell growth. Rachel shrugged. I built this with my hands. I'm not going to hand it over to a boardroom now. That night, back at home, she kicked off her shoes and sat on the couch with her kids, award in hand. Ben touched it reverently. Does this mean you're rich now? Rachel looked at him, then at the small, tidy house. The shelves filled with vendor samples. The bills still stacked neatly in the drawer. No, she said. Not in the way you mean. Then, after a beat, but I'm the richest I've ever been. Months passed. Nest grew, not just in size or sales, but in story. Teachers brought their students in for lessons on entrepreneurship. A young mom asked Rachel to mentor her. A customer left a letter, saying the shop had helped her through postpartum depression. Rachel started a small grant for local makers. Just $500 to start. But it felt big. Chris remarried. Rachel sent a card. She didn't date. Not yet. But some nights, she sat by the window and wondered about love, not as rescue, not as a prize, but as something earned and shared. Maybe someday. On Nest's one-year anniversary, she threw a party. The whole street lit up with string lights. Local musicians played on the sidewalk. Vendors hugged her like a sister. She gave a short toast. To the things we build, she said, voice steady, after everything we thought defined us has fallen away. No one raised a glass higher than Heather. Later that night, as Rachel locked up, the lights inside the store glowed softly against the dark. And for once, it wasn't about how far she'd come. It was about how deeply she'd rooted.